Right now, while you are watching this, something is shifting that most people have trusted their entire lives without ever questioning it, and that shift is happening faster than anyone expected. The security system that has protected entire nations for generations is no longer as stable as it once seemed. Not gradually over decades, not sometime in the future, but right now, within the span of just days. 2 days ago, Donald Trump posted a single word about the nations that have stood alongside the United States since 1949. Cowards. Not said in private, not behind closed doors, but posted publicly for every government, every military, and every citizen across allied nations to see. And then he added 4 words that carried even more weight. We will remember. Take a moment to think about that, because it is not just a statement, it is a signal. The leader of the most powerful military in the world just directed a warning at his own allies. Countries that have fought alongside the United States, planned alongside it, and trusted it with their security for decades. And what happened next is something that has never happened before in the history of the Western Alliance. 8 countries, nations that relied on the United States for protection for over 75 years, did not respond with statements or diplomacy. They began building something new, a nuclear security framework that does not rely on America. And most people still do not realize this has already started. Before you understand who those countries are, you need to understand what they are walking away from, because this is not about a policy change. This is about a promise that defined global security for generations. Every member of NATO built their defense strategy around one core belief: that America's nuclear arsenal would protect them if it ever mattered most, that they did not need to build their own weapons, that they did not need their own nuclear shield, because the United States would stand behind them. And that belief was not just theoretical, it was paid for with real sacrifice. After the September 11 attacks, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in its history. An attack on one became an attack on all. And allied nations answered that call. Over 3,500 soldiers from allied countries lost their lives in Afghanistan. Canada lost 158. The United Kingdom lost 456. Countries like France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Denmark, and the Netherlands all paid that price. They fought in a conflict that began because the United States was attacked. Hold that number in your mind, 3,500. Because that is what loyalty cost. That is what those countries gave in exchange for a promise of protection in return. And now, decades later, the leader who inherited that alliance publicly called them cowards. But here is where the story takes a turn that very few people expected. Those countries did not respond with speeches or statements. They did something far more significant, something that has not happened in Europe since the Cold War. On March the 2nd, Emmanuel Macron stood at a submarine base in Brittany and made an announcement that immediately caught the attention of military planners around the world. France would expand its nuclear arsenal for the first time in 34 years. The last time France increased its nuclear capabilities, the Cold War had just ended and the world believed it was becoming safer. Now, in 2026, that assumption is being reversed. But the expansion itself is only part of the story. What came next is what changed everything. France announced it would deploy nuclear-capable Dassault Rafale jets to allied countries. Not symbolic deployments, not temporary exercises, operational positioning, with cruise missiles carrying powerful thermonuclear warheads. For the first time, French nuclear weapons would be stationed on foreign soil. And that is where the shift began to accelerate. Germany moved first. A country that has hosted American nuclear weapons for decades began openly discussing whether its air force could carry French nuclear weapons instead. Chancellor Friedrich Merz confirmed that discussions were already happening and that Germany would participate in French nuclear exercises. That is not a backup plan. That is a transition. Poland followed next. A country positioned on the front line of European security chose not to seek reassurance from Washington, but instead turned toward France. Prime Minister Donald Tusk made it clear that Poland would strengthen its defenses with partners willing to act. Then came the Netherlands, then Belgium, then Greece, then Sweden. One by one, allied nations began aligning with a new framework. 7 countries that had trusted the United States for decades began building something different. And then came the 8th country, and what it did may be the most significant moment of all. Denmark, one of NATO's founding members, and a country that paid a heavy price in Afghanistan, took a step no ally has ever taken before. After losing 44 soldiers in support of Article 5, Denmark began preparing to dismantle parts of its own military infrastructure in Greenland. Not to weaken itself, but to prevent it from being used in an American operation. Let that sink in. A country that fought for the United States is now taking steps to block it. And this is not theoretical. This is already happening. Now consider what this means beyond Europe, because this shift is no longer contained to one region. It is reaching Canada. And the questions being asked now would have been unthinkable just a year ago. A Danish reporter recently asked Mark Carney a direct question. Would Canada defend Greenland against the United States if it came to that? Carney's response was careful but important. He reaffirmed support for sovereignty and territorial integrity. And while he stated that Canada would not pursue its own nuclear weapons, he acknowledged France's initiative without rejecting it. He did not close the door. And that detail matters, because shortly after, CBC published an analysis asking a question that would have seemed impossible not long ago. Should Canada follow this path? Should a country that shares the longest border in the world with a nuclear superpower begin looking for alternative security arrangements? Now, to be clear, NATO still exists. Its combined military strength is still unmatched. And every country involved in this new framework has said it is meant to support NATO, not replace it. But there is a question now that was never openly asked before. Is a security guarantee still reliable when the country behind it publicly questions your loyalty and threatens your position? Here is what cannot be undone. France has begun expanding its nuclear arsenal. 8 nations have aligned with that strategy. Nuclear-capable jets will be deployed across Allied territory. Denmark is actively changing its infrastructure, and Canada is now openly part of the conversation. Every one of these steps sends a message. Every decision adds momentum. And together, they point to something larger. The era of relying on a single country for security may be coming to an end. Alliances do not pause. Decisions do not wait. And once a shift like this begins, it does not easily reverse. The real question now is not whether this is happening, it is how far it will go.